Hey everybody, we are officially live. I'm so excited to dive into another pre-symposium panel. This is the lead up to our executive symposium that is tomorrow in Houston, Texas, on the topic building a clear vision that drives execution. Essentially, what our pre-symposium panels do is we bring leaders who are going to be at the event tomorrow together to share their insights, their perspective, their wisdom, their successes, their failures, their mistakes, all around the topic that we are discussing. In this case, it is building a clear vision that drives execution. We've got three great leaders that are going to be at the event tomorrow sharing their insights with us today. We've got Andrea, we've got Robert, we've got Charlie. Andrea, do you mind introducing yourself?
Hi, my name is Andrea Gallion. I am the Director of Client Accounting Services for Melton and Melton here in Houston, Texas.
Very nice. Robert, how are you?
Hey, good morning. Robert Harris. I'm the Vice President of Software Engineering for One Discovery, small software company based out of Virginia, but I work right here in Houston, my hometown.
Very nice. And Charlie, how about you?
Hello, everyone. Charlie Shephard, VP of Implementation and Services. I work for Key. Actually, our corporate office is actually in Connecticut.
Very nice. And I'm Garrett Mintz. I'm the founder of Ambition in Motion. At Ambition in Motion, our vision is a world where the vast majority of people are excited to go to work. When they are there, their expectations meet reality. And when they come home, they feel fulfilled. And we believe that starts with leaders because leaders create the experiences employees have while at work. And so we create technologies and communities to empower leaders to be their best selves for their teams. And one of the ways that we build community is by putting on these executive symposiums. So let's kick this off. Topic is building a clear vision that drives execution. I think the two big words in this topic are clear and execution. Because I think oftentimes a lot of executive teams they'll set out a vision, but maybe it sounds a little corporate-y or maybe it's a little vague because they're trying to
Mhm.
encompass everything under the ocean into their vision statement. And also because objectivity diminishes the higher anyone goes in any organizational hierarchy, their team is all a bunch of yes people being like, yeah, boss, that vision sounds great. And they're like, I've got no idea what the heck we're working towards. And it's really frustrating. It's really irritating. And so I love to kick off with an initial question, which is, are there metrics or measurements or is there litmus test that you follow to know that whenever a change initiative is being enacted or tried or implemented, and the vision that goes along with it, how can you ensure that it's actually being executed? Is there a measurement? Is there a metric? Is there something you look for from your team to know that not only have they told you they grasp it, but they actually are grasping it with their behaviors at work? Who wants to kick off?
So I'll start with that. So yes, I do, and it's something I learned probably pretty early in my career, and it's really just asking questions and really getting a brief back, right? So
Yeah.
as I've laid out the vision, I really want to have the team to start to build that detailed plan and then have them brief that, like, how do you plan to execute this, right? So I found that to be very effective because it allows me to learn my team and for my team to learn me, right? So the more we do this, the more we start to understand it, and they're almost, at a place going, hey, this is how Charlie would want us to do this, right? From an execution standpoint.
Robert, Andrea, what are your thoughts?
So vision is great. Software engineering company like the one I work for, we live or die by the vision. Hey, is this vision impactful? Is it going to be attractive to our customers? Is it going to get us to what's best for our company, depending on if it's an internal initiative or an external initiative. But a plan is where the rubber meets the road. Like Charlie says, all right, we've got the vision, let's turn it into a plan. And you've got to check progress on that plan. So once we get, you don't have to have all the answers before you start, but you've got to have kind of the big pieces of it in place. So we'll start executing on that plan. And something I'll watch is how many new things get added to the plan as we're trying to execute it. And are we adding things faster than we're taking them off? If that's the case, there's a problem somewhere. That's good at the beginning, but that curve has to settle down and then come back down, or you're never going to finish. Just like a software burn down chart, your plan for systemic change in the organization, follows the same rules. You have to finish it faster than you add stuff to it. So if something is stuck for a while, that's when it's time to zoom in and say, hey, tell me what the plan is. What's your vision for what piece your department, you personally are trying to do, and does it match with the bigger plan? And if it's not, then it's time for a tune-up.
And I agree with both of them. You have to start with the vision. lay out the steps. I always ask for feedback from my team to see what they agree with, what they don't agree with, why, and why. Ultimately, if I don't know why, I can't tweak the plan, I can't really guide, and that's how we move forward. And every step of the way, I'm assessing, okay, is this really working? Do I need to change it again? Do I need to alter the steps forward and change them on the next client that we work with?
That's interesting. And are there like specific metrics you're looking for within that, Andrea?
Yes, I'm looking for the amount of time spent, how much energy my staff, meaning all of my resources, how many hands do I have to have on deck to finish this one project?
That's funny. I feel like you're like, okay, cool. I have now 3 gray hairs from this implementation, so let's call that not great. This one way we did it, I only had one, so I think that looks like progress, y'all. I'm just
Right.
teasing something silly, but that makes a ton of sense. That's really interesting. So, Charlie and Andrea, you use two separate words, and I think they're different, and I think they were intentionally used. So, Andrea used the word feedback. But Charlie, you used the word briefback, and I really like that you used the word briefback because I think there's something interesting there. Because briefback isn't just, hey, this looks good, boss, or hey, I got this done in time, boss. Because ultimately, going back to that thing I said before, objectivity diminishes the higher anyone goes in any organizational hierarchy. So the concept of briefback is really fascinating to me because my understanding of it, Charlie, is that this is them communicating back to you why the change is being made, their rationale in their head for it, not your rationale, but their rationale. And then it allows you to almost kind of course correct or understand that they understand based on their own words describing the change. Is that, and do I have an accurate understanding of when you
So,
use the word briefback?
absolutely, Garrett. And so the key there, right? It really takes away their ability to just say, yes, this looks great, right? And puts them in the driver's seat. And frankly, what I found, they actually make it better, right? Because as they're going through that process of, hey, I have to do this brief, they're now going, hey, I think I understood this, but what if we take this approach, right? And so I'm always looking for those cases where the team may make some recommendations on some things, and it
Mhm.
may not make complete sense to me, but I may go, hey, let's take that on, let's try it, because now it helps me develop a behavior, right? The behavior of thinking through and problem solving and reframing, right? Versus just kind of tell me what you think, right? I feel like I have a great relationship with my team, but I'm also aware that there are certain members on the team that won't necessarily be very direct and blunt, right? To say, hey, you know what? I know what you think you're doing here, but this isn't going to work, and this is why, right? It's a challenge.
No, I like that. Something we talked about at our last executive symposium, which the topic was how to boost morale and productivity after a reorg, was this concept of having employees communicate back in their own words why a change was made. Andrea, Robert, do you implement your own form of brief back with your teams as well? And if so, how do you do it?
So yeah, I'm meeting with my team members regularly, no matter what's going on. I have one-on-ones with them at least once a month, ideally every 2 weeks. So I'm in the habit of getting constant feedback from them about how things are going and trying to build their trust. And I've got a high water mark for when I think, okay, I've finally earned their trust, and it's when they'll tell me something is a bad idea. We talked about it, as the higher up you go in the org, you're going to have everyone agreeing with everything. And some of the best feedback I've ever gotten is, Robert, this is stupid. This is going to cause us harm, and here's why. And for someone to take ownership like that and kind of, go out against the crowd and say something, a little controversial like that to me, either in public or in private, I know that's a good team player and they care about the outcome. So I look for signs of that. If someone's struggling with something, say, hey, how's this going? Trying to just get a conversation going with them. No real agenda, but do they even know they're struggling? Is a big thing to look out for, because a lot of times they don't. I say part of my job is just going and finding engineers that have wandered off into the wilderness because when you're inches away from a problem, engineers work at a very low level, and they will get stuck chasing something off, and I have to go, hey, we lost Corey today. I got to go bring him back. Um, so that's usually where things go wrong. Either they agree to something they didn't like, they didn't think was a good thing to do, and now we're stuck with the results, or they're so close to the problem they can't see that the problem is bigger than what it looks like.
That makes sense. That's interesting. I want to come back to that. But Andrea, what are your thoughts on that in terms of, do you do a form of brief back with your team?
Yes, I do. But I also want to speak to that feedback and brief back. Feedback, I take it more as those are less experienced and they might have been doing, say accounting for my role or whatever forever, but they were always doing what someone told them to do. They're now being given the opportunity to have brief backs, but their confidence isn't there to articulate it. So that's why I use the term feedback. I'm working to brief back. First, I've got to empower the team.
I love that. I love that self-awareness on that too, because I think that lines up nicely with a little bit of what Robert was saying before of, how to get your team to share when an idea is stupid requires a lot of psychological safety. I don't know. It's like my funny bad version of this. There's a lot of
Mhm.
funny bad versions of this, but do y'all ever watch a TV show, The Office?
Yes.
Okay, so there's this episode where Ryan gets promoted into the corporate HQ in New York City, and he launches this website where people can buy paper from Dunder Mifflin online or whatever. And
Mhm.
some of the people at the Scranton branch and the branch that we all follow, they're critical of it because they're like, why do I have to report my sales like for me internally, like, and on the website? And so Ryan goes up to Jim and he is like, hey, Jim, I'm just giving you a warning that you're spending way too much time over up at secretary's desk and like goofing around and stuff like that. And Jim was like, wait, is this because I gave you some feedback that I thought the website was inefficient. I didn't know why we needed to update our sales into the website. And Ryan's
Mhm.
like, no, I always appreciate critical feedback on my performance. But I just want to let you know that if you ask me again about this could turn into a warning number two. So I'm just letting you know, just the point I'm getting with all this story is that it's a funny notion that I feel like sometimes in a corporate world, people fear speaking up to their boss and having that confidence to say, this idea is stupid. How do you build that psychological safety? How do you get your team to a point where they can relinquish all, because, and by the way, this isn't just about you, this is about all their past managers. This is all their past relationships and all that baggage that they take with them into you. And so, although you might be the most amazing, gracious, warm, welcoming leader in the world, if you have someone on your team who's got a lot of baggage, it's going to take a lot to break down those walls of insecurity as to where their place is in the organization. So, how do you go about creating that psychological safety with team members, especially those team members that may come with some baggage?
I always try to do one-on-ones. I make myself available. They can always tell me, hey, I need to talk. And of course, I listen. I point out discrepancies in what I see versus what they feel like they're doing. I make sure that I always speak to those. And I'm always honest in my feedback.
Robert, Charlie, what are your thoughts?
So I think there's a few things, right? It's a journey, and I'll share a quick story on a team member that I had that I felt like I really demonstrated that, and so it's about demonstrating it, right? Demonstrate that they can trust you, doing those things that they may not be aware of, because eventually they're gonna see it, right? They're gonna recognize that, hey, I'm being taken care of, and I can open up. So probably a few years back, I had a team member. We'd all gone to dinner. And I mentioned something, and finally they go, you know what, Charlie, I finally trust you. And that really hit hard because I'm like, why didn't you trust me before? Is kind of what I was thinking in my mind, right? And it's because they'd seen the glimpses, right? They'd seen me demonstrated that, hey, I have your back, I'm going to be there for you, all of those things. but it was just one thing that kind of put it over the edge. There was like, you really took care of us here. We saw that. We didn't maybe notice it before, but you really take care of us, right? And so that was the difference. And that I could still tell there was some reluctance there. To your point, Garrett, right? There's still some baggage there from previous where they're like, yeah, I trust you, but you're the boss, so I don't know how much I want to trust you, right?
Do you mind if I ask what was the thing that you did?
I'm trying to remember what it was. I think we'd had some challenges on a project, and really I basically had the team like, let's just step away from it, right? I know you're getting beat up on this, but let's step away from it. I'll take care of any fallout, right? And basically I pushed back for them on their behalf, I believe it was.
Robert, how are you?
Not to, try not to be a big agreement huddle here, but Andrea and Charlie nailed it. It's about building trust, and that takes time. And it takes some vulnerability on your part as a leader to show some, be authentic with them and not just sugarcoat everything and say, oh, this is the best idea managers had ever. Come to them and say, hey, this is tough and a lot's being asked of us. Let's be real about this. And let the team own part of it. Say, I don't have all the answers. Help us find the right answers and have them involved in these decisions that are going to affect their life through this unpleasant phase that the company is going through. Letting them feel a little bit of ownership so they feel like they're less victims and more empowered to have a say in how this is going down has been very effective for me and my teams.
Like it. Okay. So there's some interesting parallels here between Robert, what you originally said, and what Charlie, you just said about pushing back for the team up to leadership. So Robert, when I started this pre-symposium panel, you had shared turning a vision into a plan is really critical. And one of your like litmus tests is how many more new things get added to your plate when it comes to implementing that vision. And I think so often there's a couple things that I want to unpack here because so often CEOs and executive teams come to the organization, especially to non-technical executives, to the technical team saying like, it would be really cool if we could do this. And then all of a sudden you have an app that then goes into blockchain that does something with AI. And you're like, great, but can it take my fast food order and do the people in the fast food restaurant know to deliver it to my car? Did it need all these other things? I'm just being silly with that. But the point I'm getting at is one, it brings up this concept of do you feel comfortable pushing back up to leadership? But then two, to walk that fine line of why the change has been made. Because I think sometimes you can go overboard on one direction or the other. Because if you're that yes person who says yes to all new features about new things coming down the pipe, you are just waterboarding your team. Your team is just getting overloaded with work, and you just keep piling it up. And you're like, "Oh, you can handle it. It's cool. You got this." And they're like, "We don't. We don't. We say mercy. Come on, just stick to one thing so we can focus and actually make progress here." The other side of it is that leader that's like us versus the world. Everybody else sucks and it's our team and we're ride or die. And they build all this trust with their team, but it's not necessarily the greatest because when decisions get handed down to them, they're like, I don't know why this decision was made, but we have to do it. And ultimately this is what's going on, which that creates distrust between executive leadership, that manager, and the individual direct reports that are actually doing the work itself. So how do you walk that fine line of feeling comfortable pushing back up to leadership, knowing what is the priority order of what to focus on, and still keeping everybody cohesive? Does that question make sense? I know I'm bringing in a lot of wild hairs here to contemplate, but I do think they all roam together, because if you're into one way or the other, you might be sacrificing some components of the team's efficacy moving forward.
That's a great question. I once had a leader work for a president of the company, and he once described himself as the kite, and the rest of the company was the string that kept him from going off into the stratosphere, with nothing to tether him down. So he had big visions, big ideas. Fortunately, I had built that trust with him, and we respect each other professionally. So when they start trying to throw everything into the shopping cart for the next big thing they want to build, I say that's great. Here's what it'll cost you. And it's easy to go shopping when there aren't any prices on the menu. And vision is great, but reality is you have limited time and limited resources, and trying to present it to a way that says, hey, here's what you've got to spend, and here's the most value we can bring you for that. Are you sure these are the things you want to focus on? And have them involved in a benefits, cost benefit analysis of what they're asking for, because visionaries, they love their visions, and they don't focus on the receipts that much. And I have to bridge that gap between the people that get the work done and the people that dream of it. And it's tough being in the middle. Kind of sucks, but it's worth doing. That's why you get into these positions of leadership, because you can navigate that. It takes a delicate balance of diplomacy and being real with people.
Charlie, Andrea, what are your thoughts?
So it's definitely a balancing act, right? And to really, for me, my principles are, if something's coming down, if I disagree with it, I'm responsible to lay out why I disagree, talk through the impact, right? And then if I'm still not getting that adjustment, then I'm going into mitigation mode, right? I'm thinking through, here are the things I see as the impact of this being, not working. Here are some of the things I'm going to do to really help mitigate any of those risks I've identified. And then at that point, if it's coming down from my senior leadership down to me, then I own it, right? And then I really challenge my team to do the same thing, right? It's not always fun, but I think the key there, and the thing that makes any team more productive, is you can outline why you disagree with something, and talk that through, give it some validity, right? But then you automatically, now I want to reframe now, and I want to go into problem solving mode. I want to talk through what am I doing, what I'm going to do this to mitigate any of the risks I see and what we're trying to accomplish, right? Because now at the end of the day, even if things fail, the leadership's going to see, okay, you exhibit the correct behavior, and you actually attempted to make it happen, and you gave it your all, right? So I think that's the key. And then demonstrating that and have your team see that as well, that also builds that trust, right? And frankly, I think it demonstrates the behavior that's great success.
I definitely agree with Charlie. I have to do the same quite often, where I'm in between. If I don't agree, I definitely speak out and I say that I don't agree and explain why I don't agree. Because in our three different departments, three departments work very differently. And then if nothing changes and it's still coming down, I own it. It becomes mine, and I do encourage everyone on the team to, okay, these are the new rules. Understand them and operate accordingly.
I love that you acknowledge that at the end of the day, like, y'all are in the boat. Whether you voted to not turn in this direction, the boat's being turned in this direction. And so that you're embracing that direction, standing, in the boat and intentionally taking your paddle and trying to reverse, direction is not conducive to the organization moving forward, even if you disagree with it. So I love that you acknowledge that, because I do think that's critical. Like, at the end of the day, decisions are going to be made. You may disagree with them, but the decisions are made, and ultimately, as long as everyone can row in this new direction, that gets everybody moving forward, and at least some progress to be seen, because we want the business to be successful. Like, the reason why we're so passionate about potentially rowing in a different direction is because we want to see the business be successful.
Right.
The way we think it's going to be successful is by rowing this direction. But if the organization chooses to row in a different direction, we know that us rowing in any direction other than where the boat is going is going to cause the boat to stop and not install.
Right.
Which, I think it's really great and makes a ton of sense. I'm glad that you acknowledge that, because the other notion of being the stick in the mud of, like, it's us versus the world, we're going to take them on and we're going to try to change the organization from the inside out, it rarely works. And it just creates a lot of distance, and people get frustrated, and then it becomes very territorial. And then people are trying to get budget for things. And then it's just really, really frustrating and not helpful to the organization moving forward and making progress. But before we get to that moment, Robert, you brought up this concept of, like, this is what the cost of these new ideas are going to be. And I like this concept of laying that out. I think this notion of creating a prioritization order is really critical, because I think so often a lot of executives have an assumption as to how long something is going to take. oftentimes without very much evidence that of how long it actually is going to take to do any of this work. They're like, well, I looked at this company and they're kind of similar and they were able to achieve these types of results within this time period, so we should be able to achieve something like that. But what we do is not exactly that, and we're just trying to put it all together. So how do you go about managing expectations? Because I would imagine there's this immense pressure, especially when we're talking about change initiatives or changing a vision or trying to go in a new direction or creating a new business unit or a merger or acquisition. I would imagine there can be a lot of pressure felt on those implementing that work, especially if the executive team gives us a timeline that is not based in anything that they have done before or that they have actually experienced before, but what they think should be the number. Does that question make sense?
It does, and in software engineering especially, I mean, estimates are notoriously difficult to come up with accurate ones and timelines, deadlines. Everyone knows someone that missed a deadline and took twice the time or three times the amount of time. And that's going to happen. Sometimes that's going to happen because we call ourselves engineers, but we're really more craftsmen. There's a lot of art involved in creating software. We're not building bridges and roads with predictable, well-established standards, as much as we would like to be. And so complete transparency with the stakeholders is how I handle that. I'll tell, my CEO or whoever I'm working for, hey, if something stinks, you'll smell it from me first, because I will track all that. Hey, I talked about that burn down chart. Here's our velocity. Now, if we need to change our velocity, we can extend the deadline, or we can cut some things, because it's, once again, the cost benefit ratio going. There's a lot of literature out there about how adding engineers to a late project makes it later. And it's true, even with all of our modern, infrastructure and agile and microservices, it's still tricky to just throw bodies at a problem in software engineering and have it get the result you want. So you have to just be ruthlessly pragmatic and transparent with your stakeholders. Say, hey, here's how fast the car is going. We can ditch some weight out of the car, maybe speed it up a little bit. You can buy us another car, we can build something else at the same time, but we're not going to get this car to go much faster.
No, I like it.
It's not always well received, but unfortunately, the reality is software's messy. There's going to be setbacks.
When it's not well received, how do you handle it?
With as much dignity as I can muster. And I will come to the team and say, hey, what do you think? Why are we struggling with this? Usually the best ideas come from the engineers, if you bother to ask. And we can usually find some problems and mitigate them before they become too big.
Does it ever come to blows where you're like, hey, you know what? Maybe there's another director of software engineering that can hit that timeline that you've laid out, but I know for our team, we're not able to do that. And if that's the direction you're going to have to go, that's the direction you're going to have to go, because our team is at our wits' end of burnout and everything. And unfortunately, like, this is the timeline that we're saddled with, and this is what I think we can do. Have you ever gotten to that point? Have you gotten to that point?
I've gotten close to it before. Usually it's never come to, my way or the highway, fortunately, but I've seen it happen to other people, and I've seen it happen to other industries. And then, in my own teams, we talked about, hey, the people are paddling against the direction. I had we were going through a huge transformation. We've been acquired by a company, and it was total chaos. And some people were very unhappy with how that was going. And I had a network engineer I respected tremendously. He was just going off about it constantly in public. I kept trying to tell him in one-on-ones, hey, I know this is tough. What can I do to help you? Let's see if we can align on this vision. And it just festered and festered until I finally had to say at our last one-on-one, when do you want your last day with the company to be? Because you're miserable and you're making everyone miserable, and you deserve better than this. So please go find a place where you feel better about the direction, because it's not helping you. It's not helping us. And when it's time to make that break, rip the Band-Aid off as fast as possible.
How did that work? Did it work? Did he get in line or did he leave?
He left and started his own home automation business, which had been a dream for a while. So I think everybody won.
That's okay. That's cool. That's a great story. Thanks for sharing that, Robert. I love that. Andrea, Charlie, have you ever been to like your wits' end with CEO or executive team and just gotten to a point where you're like, hey, like, our team, this is the timeline, we can do it, but like it can't be any faster than this. it can't be any bigger than this. We're at our wits' end. If you want to find a new director or new VP or new executive to run this organizational unit, go ahead. But, this is what we can do, because like our sanity, our emotional, mental well-being is not worth putting in peril because of you having this inflated timeline that's not rooted at all in any reality.
No, I
Yeah.
have never had that experience.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Charlie, have you ever had that experience?
You guys are awesome. I guess I'll be the contrarian here. Yes, absolutely. And part of the challenge, right, is because, as I laid things out, it was based on data, right? It wasn't, hey,
Mhm.
Charlie, feels like it was, here's how long these things take, right? And it's a 5 pound bag, right? 10 pounds isn't going to fit in it, right? We need a bigger bag. And so and it took conversation after conversation, and really data. Looking back on it though, it was really because I was pushing data, but it was, from the other side of the coin, it was really emotion driven, right? And I didn't recognize that. So had I recognized it, I believe at that time it would have gone definitely different, because I would have tackled the emotional perspective, right? To really understand, at the end of the day, what was their why? Why were they trying to get to that point, right? It turns out, even though we tried, so we did all those things I talked about previously, right? We're going to communicate regularly. We're going to highlight blockers. We're going to ask for that support to help remove those blockers. We're going to deprioritize things, but we still didn't make it, right? So it was, of course, initially it was truly hard not to say I told you so. I didn't, but that's the key, right? Like just, and so I guess, yes, I have been in that position where it's like, okay, what else can I do here? I feel like I've given you the data, like it's hard data. It doesn't get any simpler than that for me, but it was, again, I didn't recognize that it was that the flip side of that, it was emotionally driven, right?
Yeah, those are all great stories. Thanks for sharing that, y'all. Last question I like to ask on our panels is, what is a popular belief about leadership that you disagree with? So when I ask this question, what I'm looking for is something that you feel like if you were to survey all business people, it would be a 50-50 split, or at least more people would disagree with this opinion. Who wants to go first?
So I have a couple, I guess. So I guess one would be that more information makes things better, right?
Uh-huh.
I think
No.
we have a bad habit, and I've seen it, right? We as executives, we start talking more, or we'll send more emails, or we're sending things out. So quick funny story. I actually had an executive send me a very long email once. My response back was too long, didn't read. And basically I said, call me. Right. Like I'm too busy to read through this almost probably 2-page email. Like I'm not doing that. Right. And so and in their mind, it's like, hey, I'm going to give you all this information. So I think that's one. More information is not always better. It's the quality of the information, I think. So I think that's one. And so the other I'll probably talk about is change. Right. So I think, especially, for myself being in the technology industry, uh, a lot of times organizations or leadership feels, hey, I'm gonna get this new technology, it's gonna solve my problems. It won't, right? Technology won't solve a people problem, right? So it's you have to tackle that people problem first. If you don't, you will fail, or you will fall forward for a long time, right?
Mhm.
I love it. That's great. That those are great examples, Charlie. That second one makes me think there's this SNL Saturday Night Live skit with Adam Sandler where he's this Italian tour guide. And his caveat with he's like, you're gonna enjoy this Italian tour of the Italian Riviera and Venice and Florence and Rome and all these places in Italy. But I have to like warn you, you are still you. So if you are out of shape or depressed, you're still gonna be out of shape and depressed in Italy. Being in Italy isn't going to change your physique
No.
or whether or not you're a depressed person. So like just bear in mind, you're still you in Italy. Going to Italy will not change that. So anyways, when I hear you say new technology doesn't solve the problems, I just for whatever reason, I think that's the skit that I think of as very, very funny. Robert, Andrea, what are your thoughts? What is a popular belief about leadership that you disagree with?
That the leader is supposed to have all the answers. I see that happen with a lot of people that are starting on their leadership journey because they got promoted to a leader for being really effective at their job, at being an individual contributor. And they've built this trust. And by being really good and having the right answers and being effective, hey, great, you're a leader now. And they keep trying to do that. And what it really does is stifle the whole team. Your job as a leader isn't to have the spotlight showing how smart you are and telling people what to do because you know best. It's to be a force multiplier for your team and help them come at the best answers with, the team should outshine its brightest member, in my opinion, and enabling other people to have their success, which will be your success because you're their leader now, is something I think a lot of leaders struggle with and stumble with, is that it's not about them anymore. It's about the team.
I like it. Andrea, how about you?
So when I first started in this role at this particular firm, one of the biggest misunderstandings that I ran into was that the team didn't think I understood their work. And because I was the leader now, and I guess they had always had leaders who did not know what they did or how they did or whatever, but I did. And I knew the work better than they knew the work. But I had to convince them that the answers didn't come from me, it had to come from them.
So would you say the popular belief about leadership is kind of similar to Robert's, where it's like the leader doesn't have all the answers and like,
Yes,
I
there's no
want
way the
to,
leader can have all the answers.
yeah, no, I like it. That makes sense. Well, Andrea, Robert, Charlie, this has been a great pre-symposium panel. I feel like we covered a lot of ground in this conversation today. If you're watching this and you're thinking to yourself, I want to meet these three great leaders, come to the executive symposium tomorrow in Houston. We're going to have the event at Porsche of River Oaks. Topic is building a clear vision that drives execution. I'll post a link in the comments on this video on how to RSVP. But everybody, thank you for your time. I look forward to seeing you all in person tomorrow.